Over the years, I've seen and experienced a lot of strange and remarkable things, but one case in 2018 stands out above all the others. A family believed something evil had entered their home after their children tried communicating with spirits. After weeks of failed cleansings, we brought in a pastor. What happened next left every person in that house standing in silence, because a cross appeared on the door and none of us had marked it. Welcome back, everyone. Today I want to talk about a case I call Jesus Marked This House. This happened to a family back in 2018. We were contacted after another investigative group had gone into the home and came away feeling that something truly evil was present there. The parents would occasionally hear things like a door opening or tapping sounds, but their daughter, who we'll call Susan, was the one who seemed to be the main target. So how did all this begin? Months earlier, the son, we'll call him Brad, came home for a visit. Brad was in his late 20s and had struggled for years with drug and alcohol addiction. He had been living across the country and had come home to visit his family. At some point during the visit, Brad and his sister went down into the basement. According to Susan, she had always experienced strange things in the house. When she was younger, she said, she would sometimes see dark shadows in her room. So the two of them decided to try to communicate with spirits that night. Brad began calling out to whatever might be there, even daring something to possess him. According to what we were told, he was basically provoking whatever might have been present to enter the house and possess him. She also brought out a crystal and began doing pendulum work. Things escalated very quickly after that. The activity in the house became intense enough that the family eventually called in an investigative team. By the time I became involved, Brad had already been kicked out of the house and had moved back out west. I never met him personally, but based on what I was told about his behavior while he was there, he clearly showed signs that suggested he had some very dark forces around him. Was he possessed? I am not sure, as I never met him. But if I were to guess, I would say if not possessed, he had a very strong attachment that he worked with knowingly and willingly. Now, I'd visited the house multiple times and worked with the family for many weeks. We performed cleansing after cleansing, but nothing seemed to fully resolve the problem. Things would calm down for a little while, but the activity would eventually return. At one point, Susan had moved out to live with her boyfriend and his family. Whatever this was had followed her there and started causing havoc there as well. Her boyfriend had woken up one night to see this dark shadow hovering above him in bed. So she decided to move back home so her boyfriend and his family didn't continue to endure what she had experienced back at her house. Once she was back home, things picked up again. So we now know that she was the primary target. After weeks of trying everything we normally would do, I reached out to a Catholic priest I knew and explained the situation. I told him that nothing we were doing seemed to be working and that I was honestly at a loss. He listened carefully and then helped me put together a plan. Something that required a different approach than what we would normally do. I was hesitant at first. I didn't want to step into something God didn't want me stepping into. But the priest reassured me. He said, "You can do this." And for context, he knew the type of work our team did. So I followed his instructions and typed up a step-by-step plan of what needed to happen. Part of that process included a confession by the daughter, since she had been dabbling in practices like pendulum work and crystals. She was not a witch. I want to be clear about that. But she had participated in things that went against biblical teachings and may have helped keep the connection to the entity active. About a month or so earlier, a pastor had reached out to me and offered to help if our group ever needed him. So I contacted him, explained the situation, told him what the priest had advised, and asked if he would be willing to take the lead during the process. Since other aspects like a confession and such was being introduced, I felt having a pastor there would be best, as I was still a little uncomfortable of possibly overstepping any lines. He immediately agreed that he would do it. When we arrived at the house, we began with a long prayer session with the entire family. The daughter went through a full confession, renouncing anything she had done that might have opened a door, things like crystals, ghost hunting, Ouija boards, and similar practices. Then we moved on to cleansing the house. Earlier, when we had first arrived at the house, I had gone down into the basement to see if the entity was present from my last visit there, and it was. You could feel it immediately. It wasn't even trying to hide from us. The pastor also walked through the house beforehand, and once we began the process, no members of the family went back down into the basement, and that detail will become very important later on. After the prayer and confession, we began cleansing the house room by room. We also had the family participate. After all, this is their home. They needed to take their home back. The atmosphere felt a little different, calmer somehow. When finishing the main level, I was the first to head down to the basement, the same place where I had felt the entity earlier that day. Because earlier that afternoon when I walked down there, in the center of the basement, you could feel it immediately, that heavy feeling that something was present. But this time, it was gone. But what happened next is something I will never forget. A few minutes later, the pastor came downstairs. He was blessing the windows and doors with oil. Then he suddenly called over to me and asked, "Did you already mark this door?" I told him no, I didn't have any blessed oil with me. He asked again, "You're sure you didn't mark this door?" And again I told him no and walked over to see what he was talking about. When I rounded the corner, he pointed to the door and I saw it. A perfect cross marked on the door, and neither of us had put it there. At this point, the family had started coming down the stairs. We showed them the cross on the door and explained that neither of us had marked it. Everyone just stood there in silence, staring at it. People began taking pictures. No one could quite believe what we were seeing. Once we finished the final cleansing in the basement, we spoke with the family for a bit, still in awe of what we had all witnessed, and then we left. I remember driving home and realizing I didn't even remember half of the drive. My mind kept replaying what we had all just witnessed. Later that night, the mother sent me a text message. She told me that Brad, the son, had just reached out to her. Now, she hasn't heard from him in months, maybe up to 6 months. But right after our visit that day, right after that cross appeared on the door, he suddenly contacted her out of the blue. A little odd, I would say. My first thought, which I kept to myself, was that whatever connection existed between him and that house had just been severed. Whatever he was doing or sending to that house had ended. He needed permission back in that house to continue whatever chaos he was involved in. The house had been marked. The darkness would not be able to pass by what Jesus marked. Now, I can't tell a mother not to talk to her son, of course. So I simply just told her, "Be careful." She responded by saying, We all know what we witnessed today. She told me she loved her son, but she ended the conversation with him very quickly. The truth is, we all have no powers ourselves. Our role is simply to pray and ask Jesus and his army to deal with these entities. But to witness what appeared to be Jesus sealing that house with a cross, that was both amazing and incredibly humbling. And the final note to this story? The daughter never experienced another attack after that. And here's the photo of the door with the cross clearly visible. This case is a reminder that when people go looking for spirits, they don't always realize what might answer back. But it's also a reminder that darkness doesn't get the final word. And when God steps in, the evidence can be something as simple and as powerful as a cross on a door. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next Spirit Chasers.